Hello you, and welcome to the Silent Why podcast. A podcast on a mission to find hope in every kind of grief as we explore 101 different types of loss. As you may already know, I'm Claire Sands, host, production manager, social media manager, audio editor, transcript checker and blog writer for the Silent Why. I'm basically a one-man band here, with my lovely husband Chris hosting the 101 loss interviews with me and tweaking the music for me to make everything sound super professional. It feels like ages since I was here doing a blog or a chatty episode with you, and that's partly because I've had a rough spell with my health, which also affected my voice, which isn't ideal when you host a podcast, and nobody wants to listen to croaky Claire. But now I'm back. Although I'm only back to tell you that I'll be gone for a while. Sorry. No, I'm not supposed to be sorry. I'm supposed to be in control and unapologetic, I think. You might remember that last August I took a bit of a break to focus on my novel, and I enjoyed that so much that I've decided to do the same again this year. So the next episode after this one will be out on the 10th of September. And that's a guarantee because I've already got it scheduled to go. I also have lots of other guests lined up to chat to and exciting episodes coming up. And when you look at it, you only really miss out on 2 episodes, so it's not really that long. It's actually quite hard for someone like me to put something down like this. Some podcasters just don't put out an episode without any warning, or they just stop the podcast completely. That gives me nightmares. I'm all about good communication and being a reliable voice and presence in people's lives. What if an episode didn't go out, and someone out there thinks I've let them down because of that? Yes, any of you that do Enneagram, Insights, or Myers-Briggs will be getting a lot about me just from that paragraph. Yes, my name's Claire, and I'm a people pleaser. I like to be needed, love to be wanted, but I'm also learning a lot about myself, mostly through the Enneagram since we did that on the podcast with Laurie Alcorn. And I'm finding out where these sorts of traits can be unhealthy. I've learnt that putting other people first, even before your own health, well-being or sanity, is not a good thing. Some of you other Enneagram numbers will be thinking, duh, that's obvious. But for me, it's super hard. Therefore, you can know that it's never something I do lightly when I choose not to put episodes out. Plus, I love doing this, chatting and connecting with new people for others to listen. I just get so much joy from meeting all the people I meet, and it feels such a privilege to hear about people's darkest days, but also their brightest moments of hope. But I also love writing, and that's where my heart is. And so because August isn't the easiest month to podcast, because it's more noisy in my area with the kids being off school, and our windows are so bad that it comes out on the interview recordings. So I've made the decision to always use August to shift my focus to writing instead. Plus, it's good to have a break, and there aren't really many other times of the year that I stop the podcast. Jack London said, "You can't wait for inspiration. You have to go after it with a club." So I'm going after my writing inspiration with a club this August. If you're really stressed about there being no episodes for a few weeks, and I like to think there's at least one person out there screaming, "No!" then there's a whole blog on the month of August and why it can be really hard for some people, especially those without children. So if you're feeling that way, check it out. It's called The Season of August. Plus, there's loads of blog episodes you could go back and enjoy. Just search My Why on our podcast list. One of my personal favourites is Meet My Friend the Moon. And as we're not seeing much of the sun over here at the moment, I'm learning to appreciate him even more. And I'll put a link to both of those in the show notes. This break mostly allows me to check in with some other creative outlets that get a little ignored sometimes. I'm sure we've all heard how important creativity is by now. It's a very popular message at the moment, but those of you who have tried it will also know how hard it is to do. Whether we find other excuses like busyness, lack of time, lack of space, lack of resources, or we find it hard to switch into that gear, or we have what Sylvia Plath talked about. She said the worst enemy to creativity is self-doubt, and boy are we just naturally full of that. And from what I can work out, imposter syndrome never goes away no matter how successful you are. Basically, it can be really difficult. But Bruce Lee said, the creative process is a process of surrender, not control. And sometimes there are things in life that we have to surrender in order to make space and time for creativity. So that's what I'm doing. I'm creating space and time in my week to surrender to creativity. And it better come because I only have a few weeks. And if you struggle with this, it's worth remembering that there's something creative in you that only you can give the world. And that's really important. Oprah Winfrey said, make visible what without you might perhaps never have been seen. And George Bernard Shaw said, you use a glass mirror to see your face. You use works of art to see your soul. And that's another reason it's hard. It does involve being vulnerable, which some of us will find very difficult. but it's often where the best works of creativity come from. So, create some time for it. Go be creative. Stop putting it off. It even has healing properties and can help your brain process other things while you're doing it. There is something in you that no one else can give the world. Wouldn't it be a tragedy for you to die without that finding its way out in the world to help and inspire others? Well, I think it would. Now, there's a few other things I want to share with you while I have you here and we get to just hang out like this. Firstly, a huge thank you to those of you that support me monthly on Buy Me a Coffee. I am just continually blown away that people would choose to help me with the running costs of the podcast and support the work I'm doing to help others deal with grief. Thank you so much. You are a continued encouragement to keep this going and know that it's an important area to help people with. You cover the cost of the podcast with a little to spare that also pays for any marketing I want to do, so thank you. And I'm sure those listening that enjoy the podcast also want to thank you, because it's only free and consistently available because of your support. Also, thank you to everyone that has been in touch with me or sent me gifts to encourage me personally. I've had many smiles, laughs and tears over messages, support, donations, gifts of tea, marzipan and other wonderful presents. And for anyone out there that has been blessed or helped by the podcast or our guests, I do this for you. And if only one person has been helped in their grief or loneliness, then my work is worth it. I also want to thank those of you that have supported the Herman Company that launched in January this year. For buying one, for encouraging words, for the likes and shares on social media. Herman has his own account now on Instagram, @The Herman Company. And if you're on Instagram and not following him there, please pop over and support my work to help spread the Herman love. I'll put a link in the show notes. You can also see the accessories I occasionally make for my Herman, the latest of which prompted Chris to comment, "He looks like an old lady on her way to church." So I'm on a mission to make him some new manly accessories next time. In fact, for all listeners who have been thinking about buying a Herman, or if you know someone who needs one, if you buy one during the month of August, you'll get 10% off with the code PODCASTLOVE, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. It's been such a delight and joy seeing these little fellas go out into the world, travelling with people, keeping them company on everything from chemo treatments to holidays in Tuscany. And I'm starting to post some of the testimonies that I've had about him on Instagram and on the website, so check those out, thehermancompany.com. When I'm making Hermans, I love to think about who each one might go to, and I pray that he will help the person who receives him. Then, each time I choose one to send, I look at their little faces, and I pick the one that I think will specifically help the person he's going to. And no matter how much I follow the same pattern for these little guys, they always have a slightly different expression on their face when I finish them. Like they're all a little bit unique. For more about everything Herman, visit the website, and as usual, everything to do with the podcast is on thesilentwhy.com, where you can find blogs to read or listen to, all our episodes, the official list of 101 losses so far, which we're now over halfway through, episodes by subject and type of loss and grief, how to listen to a podcast. This is a useful page to send to someone who wants to listen to them but has no idea how to do that, and more information on Hermans and how to buy them. Plus, you can contact me, see lovely testimonies about the podcast, or sign up to my newsletter. I don't send them out very often, but when I do, you get to hear all the updates about the Silent Why and the Herman Company. And in the last one I sent out, I also included a photo of me with a flower that I found that was bigger than my head. What more could you possibly want from a newsletter? So, for now, I hope you have a lovely summer/winter, depending on your hemisphere. Summer has been slow to arrive here in the UK, and as the nights get darker again, it's a little depressing that we're heading back towards autumn already, but I can't wait to be back in September for the podcast with a new load of guests and blogs for you. In the meantime, if you're enjoying the podcast and would like to support my work to ensure that it keeps going, you can do that by sharing any of my social media posts or liking them. That really helps me. You can also buy me a fancy tea at buymeacoffee.com. You can support me there monthly as well, or you can buy a Herman, either for yourself or someone else. Every Herman donates 5% of the cost to the Friendship Lab to help people feel less alone and find friends that matter. And the profit that I make from a Herman goes into supporting the podcast and allows me to keep doing what I'm doing. I just love it when a notification pops through on my phone to say another Herman is needed somewhere. It's a bit like Batman seeing the bat signal, a little blobby shadow that appears in the sky and alerts me to the fact that another human needs another Herman. As I said before, I've got the next Loss episode recorded and ready to go when I come back in September. But I wanted to share a few words of it with you because it was so encouraging about the podcast. You might even recognise this voice because Jared is a returning guest to The Silent Why, which I'm very excited about. And this is what he said.
I feel like your show is one of the few podcasts in the world that has really touched my heart, because you guys are looking at what people don't want to look at and saying, look, there's still hope. There's still something. There's still healing. Even when you feel you're so broken you could never heal, there's still hope here.
And that's what we do want you to know. There is still hope. There is always hope. And yes, it's easy to talk about these big subjects when you're not really experiencing the pain they bring. I know that. I experienced some anticipatory grief recently, and it was a stark reminder of just how hard this stuff is. But through listening to my guests, chatting to those who have gone ahead of me, who have experienced it, survived it, and lived to tell the tale, heck, lived to help others through it, I know I can do it too. And I want to do it because they did. And that gives me hope. So thank you for listening and being here with me. I value you so much. And I'll be back soon.